I'm very pleased to announce that our first speaker tonight at our Intelligence Squared Online Plus, first speaker for the motion is Mehdi Hasan. He is a veteran of Intelligence Squared, of course, journalist and broadcaster. He's the host of Upfront and Head to Head on Al Jazeera English. He's also a columnist for The Intercept and a contributing editor for The New Statesman. Mehdi Hasan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lise. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a debate. So before you vote, let's be clear what you're voting for, what this debate is actually about, because we will hear a lot from the opposition today about Iran's awful human rights record, its lack of democracy, its sponsorship of terrorism and extremism, its support for the brutal Assad regime in Syria. And I'm not here to dispute any of those things. Iran has a lot to answer for. I'm no fan of the Iranian government. But that's not what we're here to debate today, whether Iran is good or bad. No, we're here to debate very specifically whether Iran is our enemy, not our adversary, not our rival, not our opponent, but our enemy. And enemy has a very specific meaning. Enemies aren't just those you compete with or argue with. They're people you have to hate, you have to want to fight, you have to eventually try and destroy. Is that really what we want? Another war? And does Iran even fit the definition of a real enemy? Here are three very simple reasons, in my view, why Iran doesn't fit that definition and why you should support this motion tonight. Number one, Iran is not our enemy because it's a strange sort of enemy that has worked with the West to fight the West's worst enemies. After 9/11, it was Iran that helped the US and UK topple the Taliban in Afghanistan and end the al-Qaeda presence in that country. In 2016 and 2017, it was Iranian-backed militias that helped the US and UK defeat ISIS in Iraq. They were the much-needed ground troops. Number two, Iran is not our enemy because it's a strange sort of enemy that spent 2 years negotiating with us to limit its own nuclear program, that signed a historic, unprecedented 159-page diplomatic agreement in which they publicly pledged, quote, under no circumstances will Iran ever seek, develop, or acquire any nuclear weapons. And then, according to every independent expert, every IAEA report, they stuck to the terms of that deal. They did not break that deal. In fact, it was the United States under Donald Trump that walked away from, that violated that historic nuclear agreement. Number three, Iran is not our enemy because if the opposition want you to believe that sponsoring terrorism, fomenting extremism, denying democracy to your people automatically makes you an enemy of the West, then what on earth does that make Saudi Arabia? I can't wait to hear Salman al-Ansari's speech for the opposition on behalf of the Saudis today, because it wasn't 15 Iranians who were on those planes on 9/11. It was 15 Saudis. It wasn't Iranian school curriculum that ISIS borrowed from in Raqqa. It was the Saudi school curriculum. It wasn't an al-Qaeda-sponsored Iranian cadet who just 6 months ago shot and killed 3 U.S. Navy sailors at a military base in Florida. It was an al-Qaeda-sponsored Saudi cadet. And yet, despite all of this, we're perfectly okay saying Saudi Arabia is not only not our enemy, but it's our ally, our friend, our BFF in the region, while Iran is our mortal enemy. Sorry, how does any of that make any sense whatsoever? Look, let me be very clear. Iran has done a lot of bad things. It has. But try and put yourselves in Iranian shoes, because the UK and US have done bad things to Iran too. They helped overthrow a democratically elected Iranian government in a coup in 1953. They helped Saddam Hussein's Iraq kill hundreds of thousands of Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, including with poison gas. The US also shot down an Iranian civilian airliner in 1988, killing 290 people on board, and never apologized. Now, of course, many in Iran, the hardliners, the extremists, like our own hardliners and extremists, John Bolton, want us to be enemies with them forever. They want a war at some point. But I'm not here to defend those hardliners or their rhetoric of, the great Satan and death to America and flag burning. It's dumb. It's unhelpful. It's undeniably hostile and belligerent. I get that. But we're not kids in a playground. The point is not for us to respond with more hostility, more belligerence, more provocations, more deadly economic sanctions in return. No, the point is to ratchet down tensions in the region, to de-escalate, to strengthen diplomatic and economic ties, and use things like trade, which I often hear my good friend Daniel Hannan extol the virtues of, to transform hostility into harmony, to promote democracy and freedom in Iran, not more paranoia and dictatorship. And to do all of that by voting for, by endorsing this motion, our motion today. But I will say this, It's strange to see Daniel Hannan on the opposition side. Daniel, who opposed George Bush's invasion of Iraq, who opposed Barack Obama's war in Libya, now pushing for Donald Trump and his deranged cohorts to attack Iran. The mind boggles. This is what Daniel wrote in January about the Iranians, and I quote, "They need to be confronted and defeated." That's a call for war. It is. Is that really what you want to vote for today? Another $1 trillion disastrous, illegal Middle East war that kills tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of innocent people? I mean, don't forget, a war with Iran would make the war with Iraq look like a walk in the park. And one final point before I wrap up. Think about the wording of this motion. Iran is not our enemy. Who is the our here? Who is the implied we? Is it Saudi Arabia? Is it the UAE? Is it Israel? Because Iran probably is an enemy of Saudi Arabia, of Israel, of the UAE. But come on, it poses no actual strategic threat. It's not an enemy to the people of Europe or the US, several thousand miles away from the US, or at least it shouldn't be treated as an enemy by us. If you think it's an enemy of Saudi Arabia, fine, vote against the motion. But it's not an enemy of ours. I, for one, am fed up with conflating the interests of foreign governments with those of our own. I, for one, am fed up with Western countries taking sides in a Middle East regional conflict that we should really have nothing to do with. I, for one, am fed up with the never-ending wars that the US and the UK keep starting in the Middle East, and with those irresponsible people, the unthinking hawks, who keep pushing for those attacks. There should not be a war with Iran. There cannot be a war with Iran. Iran is many, many things, but it is clearly not our enemy. So I beg to propose this motion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mehdi Hasan, for